Bazaar is intended for mature, open-minded audiences only. If you are easily offended, we suggest you turn this wacky shit straight off.
Man, so I know Lyle's watching. I know you're still not watching The Last of Us, right, Ronster?
Nope.
You're waiting for it.
I'm waiting.
Good. Oh, Virgin Eyes. I want it.
Yeah.
I want them, Ron.
Yeah.
We, I don't know if we talked about it on air, but I think we did. But we are going to do a stream of The Last of Us, the game. I'm going to play, and Ron and maybe the other guys, I'm not sure yet. I'm going to take a look at the technology. You're going to be able to watch us as we do it. We'll stream it live. I'm super excited about it. We did a little test game night last
That was
week.
a lot of fun.
We had Katie Surgery, Jeff, and Melanie come on, and we had a fucking great time. We played Jackbox games for probably, I don't know,
I don't
2
think
hours.
I've posted that to the How Bizarre page. I'll have to remember to do that. It is worth watching.
It's fun.
We kind of need to, like,
We need to dial it in.
dial in
Oh, for sure.
first.
We're gonna
We
do.
do
I
that
think
all
we're
the
gonna
time.
try.
Oh, your mic's picking that up. You got the Traeger going?
No.
Well,
Every time that happens, everyone needs to take a drink at home. New rule in the podcast.
Oh, it'll happen 2 more times. I'm sure.
I know. That's why I'm saying it. But we're fine. Anyways, we had fun. We're gonna try to get it on Discord, I think, because it seems like it might be the better way to do that stuff. I kind of totally put it, like, daisy chained it together in the way Ron used to basically record us a la podcast.
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
wasn't
I still have
efficient,
no
but
idea how you couldn't pay me $1 million and get me to successfully reconnect everything the way I had it in those early days. It was fucking hilarious.
So I'm excited about this, though. We'll get the information out there, and if you're interested in watching that, so if you haven't watched the show, fucking watch the show. It's so good.
Yeah, that's on my list.
John Mark, are you here?
Yeah, he's here. He
Who
was.
was here?
Yes, I am here.
Are you watching The Last of Us?
Yeah, but I haven't seen the last couple episodes. I saw up to episode 3.
Okay, so
I'm
this
probably
is
going to wait until the whole season's done.
No,
honestly.
totally. I'd like you to watch me play some of the game, too, because I think you will like it more.
Yeah.
You almost kind of need to watch the gameplay to understand. You don't have to, but
I
it's
I don't
want
think you
to.
have to at all.
You do not have
The
to.
game,
Yeah.
and
No, but it'll make
understand
you a
completely
lot
what's happening.
well, like the spores and stuff like that. You're not going to get that if you're just watching it for the first time.
Well, there's differences. They've
Well, they
changed
changed
some
it.
things, yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%.
That's not part of it.
I think they should change some things, right? I mean, like,
So smart.
just well, that's the key. They can't
Yeah.
just change things to change things. That has to be
Yeah.
good
And you can't do it verbatim either.
decision making, and some things will just work better as
Yeah.
a show that didn't work as a video game. Lyle, we gotta figure out what's going on with your mic real quick before we move on. Well,
fucking-
anyway, we gotta move on.
my dumb fucking,
Ron, edit this out.
We haven't even started yet.
it is. It's fucked up.
Well, since we have a soup to shower, I think we should get right on into it in the interest of not alienating maybe some new listeners. They've given us shit in the past for burying the lead. So we're going to get right into this, and then we'll have a little bit of time to shoot the shit or any stories you guys want to share before we get on to some weird triv. But this is a perfect night for this. I have been wanting to do this for a while now. I want to talk about some creepy lighthouse and lighthouse keeper related stories. I was recently reading a fascinating article about the life of a lightkeeper, and I think it's one of the more romantic, antiquated, of course, outdated ways of life and careers, but especially back in the days before electricity. But even all the way up to the modern age, working and running a lighthouse was a very unique and potentially hazardous and lifestyle, hazardous in many ways. In fact, you know what? Let me open up the window here, and well, that's funny timing.
Well,
Someone actually did open a window. I'm gonna let the ocean breeze in here, get the mood set.
You can imagine how they looked on leg day, yeah? That's twice a day, climbing up that lighthouse tower.
Yeah, they probably look like Olympics skaters.
Oh man, it would be hard. I would think. What if something broke? Like one of those bulbs, because they're about the size of a person.
Oh,
down
we're
there.
gonna talk about all these things.
And you'd have to carry that thing all the way to the top of that thing. Oh,
Look, this was not
Screw
a job
that.
for the faint of heart. But we'll get to some of that. But I've had a thing for lighthouses for a long time. I remember back when I first started making art, I was making I suppose you could say normal people art. I did a lot of painting and drawing lighthouses. Kind of fascinated with them, and I think, as far as I know, I've visited every lighthouse within 1 or 2 days drive from where I live, just because I had to see them all.
Yeah, get
Something
scale.
cool about them, and well, just they're just intriguing. I always thought my house looked a lot like a lighthouse without the tower. And at one point,
Kinda.
I was actually considering building a fake light tower addition to the roof. It would basically be like a little spiral staircase going up into an observation deck, if you will. I wish I'd done that. That would be an amazing place to sit and write, work on the Comet, have a little office or studio up there. Maybe.
Not to spoil your stories, but there's one thing I'd like to see you do as an art project, and that's taking like a shaving cream, can, and somehow MacGyvering that thing into a lighthouse.
A shaving.
As an art.
Okay.
Well, it's already got the spirals, to it.
Oh, I see.
And it's kind of, you know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
Just put a light on top, and then.
Well, that kind of sounds like something I'd do.
Maybe
like brand of kooky art.
Maybe have it sit on a little bit of area that's got rocks and stuff at the base of it, so it's kind
a
of
little diorama. I've been getting into more 3D stuff.
Cool.
So we still have lighthouses, of course, but now with satellite navigation and cellular communications and high-powered LED technology, the modern lighthouses are really just automated beacons. We approach them more from antiquated objects of architectural interest and historical interest. There's still a romance about them, but there really aren't light keepers anymore. But in the early days, the importance of these lighthouses, it's probably hard to truly calculate with the modern way of thinking. And obviously, we could all see the benefit of lighting some of the rocky shores so that the ships don't crash into them. But they had to be strategically placed in a way that it wasn't just to keep people from crashing. It was to keep them on course with certain destinations and certain areas of the world. When you were sailing out in the sea using a sextant and the stars and a compass and a map, that could get you dialed in fairly well, but on those clear nights, you really benefited from being able to see the lighthouses just as an orientation and to make sure that your calculations were right. Because if you were like off 1 or 2 degrees, 15 miles out into the ocean, that could get you 100 miles off course at the end of your journey. You really had to keep this shit dialed in, and lighthouses also helped with that. But a quick little mini history on lighthouses before we get to some of the creepy stuff. Obviously, the first incarnations of these would have been just a big fire on the shore, and that's what they did. They built towers eventually to put the fires on top. Those were really the first lighthouses. Other inventions came along the way, including things to make the flame more visible, but until the invention of glass lenses, you had to be pretty damn close to see the flame, even a big fire, especially if it was foggy. Now, one of the most famous tower lighthouses in antiquity is the Pharos of Alexandria in Egypt. Massive column, about 350 feet tall. And it was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and the only structure that was taller at the time were the Great Pyramids in that area. And it was thought to have been destroyed in the earthquakes of the 1300s. So it is no more, but we know it existed. And the technology and style of lenses morphed over the years, but one of the biggest eureka moments concerning lighthouses was the invention of the Fresnel lens. The French physicist and engineer Augustin Fresnel came up with this really intricate shape, and in layman terms, it just made the beam brighter. But what it was really doing was it had all these little angles and all these mini, almost looking like magnifying glasses. We've all seen this now. You had the old lens that looked like just one giant magnifying glass basically spinning. This thing looked more like a pineapple. And it had all these different bevels and angles, and it basically shot the light instead of 1 or 2 prisms. It shot it like hundreds of prisms every which way. And then they
I wonder how long it took him to make something like that. How many trials and errors he went through to find that right recipe.
Engineering is always impressive to me, especially this kind of thing. But especially in the early days when you really just had to first of all, you had to think it up. and then you had to make it happen, and then you had to have the tools to make it happen, which usually meant inventing the tools and engineering those just to make the thing happen. Yeah, it's insane how we got anything done ever.
I was going to say the Egypt one. If most people know, it was fire. It wasn't like electricity,
right?
Fueling it, but they would
big torch.
They'd have to carry like basically logs all the way up 300 some odd feet up, and
that's why you have slaves.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wait.
Well, after that, they did have lenses. They had pretty early lenses, but then they would move on to candles.
Mm-hmm. They're like brass,
like the whale oil candles, and then they would they'd still try to magnify them with whatever glasses and lenses they had. But the Fresnel lens really changed everything. And the earlier lamps, like I said, were kerosene or whale oil with a parabolic reflector. And once humans had refined mechanics and gears and clockworks, later on, these were used to actually rotate the light, which, of course, not only made them easier to spot on a foggy night because it had a strobing effect, but they would even sometimes get jiggy with it. They would flash almost like, not Morse code, but there would be codes, like sometimes a lighthouse had its own flash. It would be like 2 flashes, then nothing, then 1 long flash, and that meant, oh, that's the light over there, and then you'd see one further down the quote-unquote road, but they would also send messages out to some of the ships, sometimes warning of danger, warning of very specific conditions against the rocks and fog that maybe they couldn't see out there, because a lot of times the fog would just sort of bank around the shores. So they would use those to actually send messages, and with varying success, I'm sure, but it wasn't until the 70s when lasers really started to replace some of these older oil lamps. And or the bulbs, but the bulbs had to be massive, or you had to use a ton of them. So up until the lasers, they were using really just flames, big actual lamps and lanterns that were magnified. And now, of course, as I mentioned, we have ultra bright, ultra cheap, long-lasting LEDs. And they just flash, gone are the days of the sort of Eye of Sauron-esque beam of light scanning the seas, the rocky shores. Also gone are the light keepers themselves. And these places are really just beacons. And we just visit them because they're cool. There's occasionally some maintenance needs to be done. And you'll go take care of that. That's pretty much it. No one really lives these places anymore. And since lighting a populated town isn't necessary in most situations, a lot of these early lighthouses were kind of out in the middle of nowhere, often on ragged, dangerous bluffs and cliffs. And sometimes they're on little islands far off from shore. And I'm sure you've seen some of the pictures of these crazier ones that were just literally built on a rock out in the middle of the sea, on low tide. And when it was high tide, it was just... Yeah, it's really interesting. I didn't... research it too much, but it's based on some sort of compression type building. So what's cool about those is they build it in a manner that as the waves hit the stone wall of the lighthouse, it actually compresses it into itself. So in other words, the more it gets hit with waves, the stronger it gets. It just sort of compacts it into... Basically, at some point, it becomes this giant tubular stone, and that's why some of those ones still last in spite of being blasted from Mother Nature for, over 100 years in some cases. So
until they turned to diamond, huh? Just
yeah. Now it's all monkey work. But to run one of those lighthouses in the day could be quite dangerous and stressful, and certainly at times lonely. And there are a startling number of light keepers gone mad stories throughout history, and we'll probably talk about a couple of those. There aren't a lot of documented cases, like it was just as simple as the light keeper went mad and killed everybody, but a few ghost stories that we'll probably mention along the way, and then one of my favorite lighthouse stories. That's one of the more well-known ones, but some of you might not have heard it. Something I came across concerning the madness that many light keepers have developed in their times of isolation, keeping them lights burning. There may have been, well, not may, there definitely was something completely unrelated to loneliness and the stress and the work of the job and that is mercury. So listen to this little bit from the Old Salt blog concerning the Fresnel lens and how they revolved them in the early days. It says, for rotating lights, just as important as the strength of the light was maintaining a specific speed of rotation, so that if the chart said that the light flashed every 20 seconds, the light in fact rotated so that the light was visible every 20 seconds. The best near zero friction bearing of the day was created by floating the light and the lens on a circular track of liquid mercury. Now, when dust and dirt and other impurities built up in the mercury, part of the light keeper's job was to, by hand, strain out all the mercury with a fine cloth, get the gunk out of it, refill. If you can sort of picture, it's kind of like a circular canal. You know, it's like a donut-shaped canal, and the lens sat in that canal and literally floated. It was connected to all the gears underneath it, but in between that was just a cushion, a liquid bearing of mercury that could handle the weight of those massive Fresnel lenses. So they would have to refill the mercury after straining it, and they'd have silver all over their fucking hands.
I'm imagining like one of those cat toys that's like the donut that has the little ping pong ball on the track, and they bat it around just like that, but filled with mercury.
It's exactly like that. Yeah.
You know it's. Whoops. Sorry.
Huh?
I'm trying to fix my mic. It's kind of funny. What would be funny is like if they were making those Mad Hatter hats on the island.
Mm-hmm. Double whammy.
Double whammy.
It's like a lighthouse keeper got bored, so he took up the hobby of hat making. Yeah, he's toast.
Yeah, mercury is what made most of those people the clockmakers too.
Clockmakers, Mad as a Hatter. I mean, that's where we get to seeing Mad as a Hatter.
But
they didn't know that back then.
And their teeth would fall out. And
well, one of the symptoms was the onset of madness. Like to the point of hallucinations and enraged acts of lunacy. So I found that really intriguing. I'd never heard that. I had no idea that that's how those lenses
Suddenly
rotate.
The movie The Lighthouse is making a lot more sense to me.
I haven't seen that.
Oh, my God.
I've wanted to, and for whatever reason, I never got around to seeing it. But yeah.
We should do a movie night.
Oh, we should. I did watch one movie connected to this, and we'll talk about that toward the end here. But first, let's get to some mini stories, and then we'll get to the main meat. The first one is a murder that happened at the Gibraltar Light. It's hard to say. Here's what the Torontoist says about this case right off the page. The lighthouse is the oldest one left on the Great Lakes and the second oldest in Canada. It was built in 1808 and guided ships to Toronto's harbor from what was then a sandy peninsula until it was decommissioned in 1958. And any building that old has its secrets. The lighthouse was there during the Battle of York in 1813 when American ships invaded the town of York, which culminated with the burning of the Parliament buildings. The British retaliated later in the War of 1812 and burned the White House down. A lot of people forget that we had our damn White House burned to the ground. Imagine that in these days. Well, I think a lot of people might like to imagine that these days. During the war, the first lightkeeper, J.P. Raidmuller, which is a hell of a name there, a German immigrant to Upper Canada, kept watch at Gibraltar Point for enemy ships and friendly vessels returning to safe harbor. But he didn't live to see the end of the war. Raidmuller disappeared under mysterious circumstances on January 2nd, 1815. The story goes that he was murdered by two soldiers who had been enjoying his home-brewed beer. Versions of the story differ slightly. One version told in the mid-2000s was that Raidmuller was killed after the soldiers bought the beer but saw it freeze during the cold winter night and assumed the alcohol content was so low that the lighthouse keeper was trying to rip him off. But most agree that Raidmuller was killed that night and dismembered by his killers, who buried his body in a few graves near the lighthouse, where his ghost is said to still haunt the site. Many sources saying the reports tend to be mostly sounds of a man moaning out in the mist, and the sound fades as the fog burns away into the dawn. You can also imagine seeing a guy in like 5 pieces floating out there.
Yeah, it could be some guy out there. Could be some guy out there in the yard, mighty aroused, kind of tweaking on the nipples. Going, oh, lighthouse, I love you.
Some of us, well, fog sets a mood. Next up is the Lookout Lighthouse, and this is considered to be the most haunted lights in the world, one of the most haunted lights in the world, and is one of the most haunted parts of Maryland. Many a paranormal, if you're into ghosts and you've watched these shows, you've definitely seen this place. Many a paranormal researcher has ventured there to stay the night and do the research, and it was built in 1830 and decommissioned in the early 80s. So it had a good run, but there's been quite a bit of history there. Many researchers think that the ghostly presences are likely from Confederate times, including the first lightkeeper, Ann Davis. And one of the many researchers claimed high levels of paranormal activity are happening there. And one of those guys is named Dr. Hans Holter. Here's a snippet from an essay, Maryland.gov, which I thought this was kind of a cool little kooky story for the government side of the state to include. Here's what we're all about. Holter's team successfully recorded 24 different voices in the building, both male and female voices singing and talking, often using quite colorful language. One comment, "Fire if they get too close to you," was thought to be a reference of the great number of Confederate soldiers imprisoned nearby. A female voice recorded on the tower staircase and believed to be that of Ann Davis, wife of the first lightkeeper, spoke, "My home," echoing throughout the chambers to this day. Yet another voice said, "Let us not take objection to what they are doing." Lighthouse visitors, including Dr. Holter's team, have experienced very chilly air in parts of the building, along with a rotten smell emanating from one particular room. Oddly, as soon as Dr. Holter made public his belief that the smell was from the tormented spirits of people held there against their will, those falsely accused of spying or having Confederate sympathies, the smell disappeared. I found that kind of interesting. Maybe they just needed to be remembered and have somebody speak their history. And it's like, all right, we'll stop stinking the place up and move on.
Yeah.
That's kind of creepy.
But one of my favorite parts about this one are the many sightings of the unusual sounds and spectral visions that have been reported, such as that of Ann Davis standing at the top of the stairs or out on the balcony overlook in a white blouse and her long trademark blue skirt. Yeah, interesting stuff. You can imagine that all sorts of creepy and romantic tales in some of these more remote, and anything to do with the Civil War and some of these old war places. Yeah. Those are haunted places, whether there are ghosts there or not. Those are haunted, hollowed, weird ground.
Extra credit stories. Do you remember in the 80s, it was a popular picture of a man standing on one of the ocean towers where he's got the front door open, and he's standing out there. Oh, yeah,
it's one of those ones that's out in the middle of the sea.
And they're standing out there to give a little bit of perception on how big this, lighthouse is, and it's huge.
Yeah.
And it's right in the middle of a thunderstorm, or like a storm out in the ocean. So there's photo. Like these 80-foot waves crashing, curling around this tower where the man stands in a dry spot. He's just like, whatever. Yeah. I just came out here to get some fresh air. What's going on, guys?
Well, think about the type of personality it would take to not only just be there and to get that picture, but that's where you work and that's where you live, at least for several months out of the year. Yeah, different kind of fucking human being altogether.
Oh, yeah. What was the year you... one more time there. What was the year you said that he developed that lens?
Let's see. When was that? I'm guessing that would have been the early 1900s. Late 1800s, awesome. Early 1900s.
Wow. The pineapple.
Probably Victorian era, late Victorian era. Yeah, the pineapple.
Yeah. It looked like a disco ball kind of blown out.
Well, we still benefit from the Fresnel lens to these days at our parties.
Oh, 1822. That was when that was invented.
Oh, wow.
Or put together.
Dude, that's
even more amazing. Next, we have the Pensacola Lighthouse. This is one I'm just going to read right off of Listverse. The Pensacola Lighthouse stands on a tropical beach with a breathtaking view, but its history includes a sinister story. Michaela Penelber married the man of her dreams, Jeremiah Ingram, and merrily moved into the lighthouse not long after it was completed in 1826. Theirs seemed like a wonderful union, but strangely, the couple's marriage turned sour almost overnight. Its sudden turbulence came to a head when Michaela stabbed her husband to death one evening in 1840 for seemingly no reason. She was never convicted to the murder due to lack of evidence and lived out the rest of her days in the lighthouse until she died in 1855. But even in the afterlife, it seems that Michaela's violent streak lives on, as visitors have reported objects being thrown at them while they walked through the living area where Michaela and her unlucky husband stayed.
Yeah, the bitch ain't done.
Large blood stains that would be visible on the floor, and then they would disappear on their own. Local residents stated that he had once tried to wash blood off, but it would just reappear, had the opposite effect, like he had blood stains on his clothes that could not be washed away after visiting the lighthouse. Yeah, that's a cool kind of story. Chillingly, some visitors have heard breathing behind them and sensed a presence following them while taking the staircase to the lighthouse tower. Now, I looked into this, and many people don't even think Jeremiah's death was a murder. They kind of mentioned there wasn't evidence, but since this was never really solved, the mystery and legend remains. But I just found it fascinating that she would just keep living no matter what happened. Her husband died in that very small little space, and she lived out her days. That was her home, no matter what happened there. Here's one from our neck of the woods, sort of straight off of the Old Salt blog here. I'm just going to quote this one too. Tillamook Rock Lighthouse, off the coast of Oregon, about a mile off Tillamook Head and 20 miles south of the Columbia River. And it rises from the stormy Pacific, looking, some say, like a basaltic sea monster. In 1879, before construction even began on the lighthouse, a mason, John Treviwas, drowned while he was surveying the rock. And things didn't get much better from there. The construction of the light was difficult, and it took 500 days to complete. But in early January 1881, the lighthouse was near completion when Baroque Lupacia was wrecked near the rock during the storm, killing all 16 crew members.
Baroque. You know what to say.
The Baroque.
If it ain't Baroque.
If it ain't Baroque, don't sail it.
Well, what a lot of people don't really know is like the mouth of the Columbia right there is very tragic. It's
called the graveyard of the Pacific.
Well, it could turn at any minute. It's Buoy 10. It's where a lot of people go fishing for salmon out there, and it's just
there are pilots that live right there in Astoria, pilots and sailors that live there, that their sole job is to they get helicoptered onto some of these big barges and ships that have to navigate the tricky waters of the Columbia, where it comes out into the Pacific. It's so dangerous and so treacherous that these highly skilled pilots, and they call them pilots for whatever reason on these big shits, and they would be helicoptered out there to take over and get them past the treacherous spots, and then they'd go back home in time for lunch, and that was their entire job. And that's still happening today. So yeah, it's a very dangerous spot. Now, 4 lighthouse keepers were assigned to that lighthouse, and they quickly earned the name Terrible Tilly. But the isolation, constant storm, and blaring of the foghorns, that's another thing that I hadn't mentioned. The foghorns are not something that happen, like once or twice every hour or two. It's if anyone lives near a lighthouse or a beacon, they know the foghorn is constant. It's like,
just all the time? Oh, okay.
It's like, it's maybe not quite, it's close. It's close to that repetitive. Like you hear it more than you don't hear it. So it's a constant thing. But imagine having that when you're firing it off right in your fucking ear, and it's like shaking your lungs. Those old foghorns were massive. Go ahead, Lau.
No, I was going to say, every time you hear that I hear that, I think about BioShock. Because it's in that game. Yeah.
They don't make that noise anymore. Now those are automated too. They're digital. Like the one that I heard when I was staying in Newport last time I was there was more like, ooh, which I found more annoying.
I'd
rather hear the low one. Anyway, to wrap that one up, the constant storms and blaring foghorns made duty difficult at best. Reportedly, one keeper went insane and tried to kill a fellow man by putting ground glass in his food.
Yikes.
And in the 1950s, old Terrible Tilly was torn down. So sadly, we can't visit that, even though that location was in our neck of the woods. Here's a gem, the Execution Rocks. This is what Atlas Obscura has to say. The tiny rocky island on which it was built was known as Execution Rocks. The legend has it that during their occupation of Long Island during the Revolutionary War, British redcoats would chain colonial prisoners to the rocks and execute them by allowing them to slowly drown during high tide. So they'd have all of low tide chained to the rocks, and slowly high tide comes in and drowns them. That's pretty gnarly. The island's gruesome history added a new chapter in the 1920s when famed serial killer Carl Panzram confessed to luring sailors away from bars, murdering them, and dumping their bodies on the island. When the last lighthouse keeper retired in the 1970s, the lighthouse turned fully automatic, but visitors still report unusual sounds, apparitions, and footsteps, ghostly reminders of the island's troubled past. That's a troubled little spot. There's a lot of suffering and tragedy happening on Execution Rocks. One more little one here, and that is the South Stack Light. And this one has a pretty deadly history as well. Here's what Mysterious Britain has to say. Supposedly, the lighthouse is haunted, and it has been featured in an episode of the television program Most Haunted, Season 9, Episode 1. The story goes that on the 25th and 26th of October, 1859, an extraordinary storm known as the Royal Charter Storm, after the famous steam clipper that was lost the day on the coast, and there's 450 souls on board, smashed the western coast of Britain, sinking 133 ships and badly damaging further 90, according to the Board of Trade records. The assistant lighthouse keeper at the South Stack at the time was John Jack Jones, the 3 J's, and on his way to the lighthouse on the 25th of October, he was struck on the head by a falling rock from the cliff face just as he reached the suspension bridge.
What a way to go.
He was critically hurt, but managed to get across the bridge in the gale force 12 storm, climbed the path, and reached the lighthouse. Regrettably, his cries for help were drowned out by the storm, and he wasn't found until the next day by Henry Bowen, lying outside the door to the lighthouse. He died 3 weeks later from his injuries, and it is said that heavy footsteps can be heard along with strange screams, and that rattling of the door and the rapping on the window is said to be the ghost of the lighthouse keeper in search of shelter from the storm. Good spookery stuff, lighthouses. But anywho, all that is really the opening act. This one isn't super long, but I think this is the meat of the story, and that is the tale of the missing light keepers of Eilean Mor. This is off the coast of Scotland. So in mid-December 1900, a steamship called the Archer was en route from Philadelphia to Scotland when they were passing by the well-known light at Eilean Mor. And this is part of the Flannan Isles, which mostly rocks, but the biggest island was Eilean Mor, and that's where they built the lighthouse. But right away, they noticed that the light was not lit, and this was especially odd since weather had been pretty gnarly over the past few days there, but it would have been lit no matter what, as mentioned earlier, simply for navigation purposes, not so much warning to not smash into the rocks. There's also no sign of any crew, which would always at least hop out of the lighthouse in the building, or if they were out working on the grounds, they would stop and wave. It was kind of an interesting change of scenery when you had a ship go by. And, of course, they would have seen the ships approaching for hours. In some cases, if the conditions were right, they could see that ship approaching the day before. And they would always be out there welcoming them. And whenever there's a ship passing by, it was customary that they would run up a flag that said, it's safe to moor here if you need to. Or if it's a replacement crew or bringing provisions, they would always raise that up and let the ship know, everything's fine here, we're ready for you, there's no weird currents or fog or anything against the shore, so come on up. None of that had been done. So they made a note of it, but they sailed on. They were not going to stop at Eilean Mor, but they just made a note of it and kept on their merry way. They would talk about how exciting it was to see the ships go passing by, especially on a foggy night. Out in the middle of the night, they'd see like a big steamer ship go by, and you could see the little windows lit up with, oil lamps. I just thought, man, that's such an interesting, oddly spooky and eerie, but just an interesting romantic sight. This is sort of a silent ship floating out in the middle of the sea with all these little souls, whatever they were doing in those rooms, reading a book, playing checkers, or 69ing, whatever. All the life that would go on in a floating city, just kind of silently passing by. It's like a ghost ship, and it's just gone. So it would be a very strange thing for them to not at least want to go wave and spot the ship. So the captain of the Archer made that note, and then they sailed on to the mainland Scotland, where they arrived 3 days later. Now, there are different versions of the story. One of them says that the captain sent a letter to the lighthouse board about the strangeness. Others say that ship actually ended up crashing, and he was never able to send that. There's a little bit of fogginess here, no pun intended, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. But first of all, let's back up a bit. So there were 3 crew members. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but it was at some point they got smart enough to realize that there has to always be 3 crew members. And that's because, if one got sick or hurt or worse, that there would be enough manpower in the other 2 to get the job done, and enough time to at least get a relief crew member delivered 3 or 4 days later or however long. So it was always going to be 3. And in this case, it was James Duckett, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur, with a 4th crew member stationed not far off. It was a backup crew member, and he was going to swap out with Donald MacArthur in a few weeks. And his name was Joseph Moore. There always had to be 3, but there was never more than 3 because that was a waste. Now, the other 2, Duckett and Marshall, were well-experienced lightkeepers, but Donald MacArthur was a bit more of a rookie. He'd only really done apprentice work and very part-time lightkeeping. He knew what he was doing, and he had proved assault enough to work, one of these desolate locations like Eilean Mor. But he was still kind of a noob, and that might come into play a little bit later. But when a man named William Ross was actually supposed to be the original 3rd crew member, but he got sick at the last minute, so MacArthur was hired to fill in for him. So on December 26th, the relief keeper Joseph Moore, who was, again, supposed to have swapped out with MacArthur, and he was on his way to do that, was on another boat called the Hesperus, making his way to the seemingly troubled Eilean Mor light. When the Hesperus landed on the island, they also saw that everything looked wrong. Not only was the light still unlit, and no crew members were down on the landing to greet them, but the landing itself had showed major signs of destruction. The solid iron railings of the landing were bent and broken. There was a life buoy that had been ripped from its moors, as if it was just like grabbed from a giant hand and ripped, and everything was just bent and craggled and destroyed. The landing was really just a concrete platform or wood platform down by the water with ties and pulleys, and a cargo cart that could be pulled all the way up the 160-foot hillside, what was a cliffside, basically via a little railroad track that they had built. And they would pull it all the way up with relative ease, loaded up with supplies and provisions. This was sort of their lifeline, and they would follow that all along the hill. And the lighthouse sat atop that bluff, and at the very edge of that, from that to the sea, was well over 100 feet. So it was a pretty secure and well-placed light. But Moore took the path up to the lighthouse and found it completely empty. And the logbook, which the crew used to document weather and passing ships and day-to-day activity, was open, and it looked like someone had been writing in it and hadn't put it up. But there's no sign of any human beings. All of the clocks had stopped. This was the days of wind-up clocks, and keeping those clocks wound was a crucial bit of business, because if you forgot and you're like, oh shit, has it been 5 minutes? Has it been 5 hours? When did that clock stop? It was a big job, and if you don't want to fucking lose track of time, you can't lose your one source of time. And so they were all stopped, and they knew that it had been a while since anyone had been in this room, at least in any kind of good condition. Interestingly, they found MacArthur's coat hanging on its side hook. But the other coats and really any other sign of the crew were nowhere to be seen. Now, the captain of the Hesperus sent a frantic telegram back to the mainland saying, and I quote, "On our arrival this afternoon, no signs of life was to be seen on the island. Poor fellows must have been blown off the cliffs or drowned trying to secure a crane or something like that. Night coming on soon, we could not wait to make something of their fate." He went on to say that Moore and 3 other men stayed on the island to work the light, and they checked the recent log entries. And on December 12th, Marshall had wrote, "Severe winds, the likes of which I have never seen before in 20 years. And on the 13th, the log read, "Storm still raging, all of us have been praying." The last entry was on December 15th, which read, "Storm ended, sea calm. God is over all."
All I can hear is the Lord of the Rings when they're reading the book in the mine. They're like, the drums, we can hear them coming.
Yeah. Well, this last couple of log entries are disputed for a couple of reasons. One, the log has never been, it's lost to time. And a few other, I guess, pieces of evidence or artifacts from this thing were, they weren't taken care of. We have logs of them. We have logs of the log, but not the log itself. We just didn't hang on to stuff like we do now. And also, this is a true story. Like, this is a proven story. It's just what the fuck happened, that we don't know. But that's what we're going to talk about. But the story was such a legend that years and years and years ago, a poet named Wilfred Gibson had done a song or a long-form poem about Eileen Moore and the cursed crew, and he added some elements of drama, and one of those things that he had in there was those log entries, and it doesn't seem like there were much mention or any mention of that before that poem. No one had really found any concrete evidence that that's what was actually in there versus that's what this poet added, and so that became part of the legend. The other thing is, this was a very military type of an operation. These logs were pretty dry normally. You would say, you would give the weather and you would give any injuries. You would report things pretty dryly. They're not going to care if you had a good cry or if you were talking to God. But some other people theorize that what may have happened is they are actually reading one of the crew members' personal journals, which they certainly would have been keeping. And there you could have read anything along those more, I suppose, fanciful lines. No one really knows, though. Now, the island itself was fairly gnarly. It was one of these craggly rock with abrupt cliff sort of islands, but with some greenery and lush spots atop the plateaus. The stories from this island go all the way back to ancient times, with all sorts of spooky legends, way before the lighthouse ever showed up. Too many to even go through, really, but one thing I found interesting was sheep herders once thought that the island had mysterious properties that would cause the sheep that grazed there on the green grass to be more fertile, and in many cases they would actually have like twin calves. But because the sheep herders themselves were terrified of the legends and just the mood and just being on that island, they wouldn't stay there. They would boat the sheep onto the island, unload them, and they'd be like, "See you in 3 days, bitches," where they would pick them up, and hopefully the island did its magic on them. That's a true story. Now, obviously, was that all the reason that they did that? Who knows? But that's a true story. They really, they could have stayed there. They could have set up camp. and started a fire. Other people had lived there at one point. The only other structure besides the lighthouse on that island, and it's there to this day, is a very, very old, like ancient little chapel. So there was at one point even a congregation of some sorts on that island. There's a lot of legend and stories about that too. Anyway, this is the scene of the mystery. So let's go back down to when Moore came up to the lighthouse. There were a few puzzling things here. First, it was a violation of protocol for all three men to be outside the lighthouse at the same time. One crew member always had to be inside the light. I think for obvious reasons, if the other two got in trouble, someone had to be there to keep the light going. And you never knew what could happen, so that was just one of the things that became a standard practice. And again, this was almost like a military type discipline. So one crew member would stay up no matter what. They were even trained, literally, if you see a sea beast coming out of the ocean and tearing the other two apart, you stay in the lighthouse and you keep it going. So the fact that nobody was in the lighthouse really showed, coupled with the fact that one of the crew members didn't even put his coat on when he exited the lighthouse. And remember, this is mid-December off the coast of Scotland. It was freezing, and it had been stormy temperatures or stormy conditions.
That is kind of funny, though, if you imagine like a kraken, like just climbing up the lighthouse, and the other two guys are like, "Come down here and fight this damn kraken with me." And we're like, "Yeah, man,
that'd be a violation of protocol." That'd be a violation.
That'd be a perfect Monty Python little skit
right there. Yeah. This whole thing could really turn into a pretty great Monty Python romp. But each crew member only had one coat and one pair of boots, one wool hat. Again, the military thing. And everything had to be accounted for. So, you may be thinking, well, maybe he put on a different coat, or he had a heavy sweater. It's like he wouldn't go outside without his coat. You just wouldn't. There'd be no reason to do it. So, breaking the rules, exited the lighthouse without your coat, something major happened. Now, of course, as mentioned, the ghost stories and other supernatural legends of the island immediately had people guessing some sort of paranormal ending. Obviously, there's no end to where those guesses could go. But another popular theory is that it was a massive sea beast that attacked the men as they were securing the landing down on the lower area by the water. And the theory is MacArthur was up in the lighthouse. He saw that the other two were in trouble, rushed out to get, to try to fight the beast off of his comrades, in such a rush that he didn't put on his coat, but ultimately they were all dragged into the sea. Purveyors of this opinion often point to the manner in which the steel bars and the railing were also violently mangled. And of course, the giant sea beast theory is pretty far-fetched, but we have centuries of tales of sailors being attacked by giant squids, and only recently did we get some footage of some of these massive creatures down there. And
they're real.
Yeah, you can see how, attacking an island, most rare, sure. But you can see, if they wanted to, they fucking could. You could see how something, that one that Monster Quest caught footage of. It's really the only interesting thing that I ever saw Monster Quest get, was that giant fucking squid. And I'll never forget it. It was like they got a really good flash picture of a giant squid, and they're like, oh, but then the flash went off like a second time, and the camera focused on what was behind that giant squid, and it was another squid that was like 8 times the size of the one, and it was so eerie to see that unfold that way. And that's when I'm like, holy shit, some of these sea beasts attacking ship stories have to be fucking true. They just why wouldn't they? They could. Just a fucking bored, or maybe some diseased fish out there, just like
hunger.
Yeah, who fucking knows?
Well, so I'm a fucking fish. Everything sucks.
I got to live with fish. The ocean's gross.
All these nuclear power plants fucking dumping in radiation into the ocean.
This is a good movie. This movie's writing itself.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. You know what I'm disappointed in is that they didn't say it. They were like mermaids. Like coaxed him out. Come on and party with us.
That's probably one of the theories. There's so many theories.
We got our booby tassels on, and you need to take your coat off.
They're called seashells, Lyle. Thank you.
Seashells at the seashore.
I thought the seashells were for the ass. What movie is that from? Anyway, so probably not a giant sea monster story. But of course, the going theory and the more real-world theory is more mundane, but not really all that less terrifying, because the storm had brought these massive waves to the island, and 2 of the men were in trouble. That's the theory. Then MacArthur, again, saw that they needed help and rushed out, and they all got swept up by the giant waves, or maybe the wind blew them into the water. And you might ask why they were even out there to begin with during the storm, risking their lives to secure that landing. But again, this was their lifeline. And also, one of the crew members had done a poor job of securing that just a few days before. And he got he was reprimanded. And he was like, probably, I'm not going to get in trouble again. I'm going to go make sure I did that right. But it's awfully stormy. All right, come out and help me. You can see how that could happen that way. And so it goes that they went down, got in trouble. McCarthy saw and ran out again without his coat. But here's where it gets a little odd. So McCarthy would, at least initially, have been up in the lighthouse the whole time. There's no way that they all would have run out and then got into trouble. This definitely would have happened in a couple of sequences. The light, as tall as it was, the angle was not right. You could not see down to the mooring. You could see the track and some of the gear, but then that went over the bluff, and then it dropped straight off. So you could not see the men down at the mooring, at the landing. So MacArthur, no matter what happened, could not have looked out and saw them that close to the sea, get into trouble, and then run down to try to help them. So another theory is that a monster rogue wave actually hit the island on the top side, where the lighthouse itself sat. Now, again, that would have had to have been well over 100 feet. And we know that rogue waves happen. And even then, we knew that waves could be pretty fucking big. But 100 feet was not something that had really been seen at that point. 50, 60, maybe even 70 feet, that had been seen. But even that was like reserved for massive storms way out at sea. Not something slamming into the sides. And even a lot of the tsunamis that they had seen in that area at the time weren't that big. And this wasn't a tsunami anyway, so it would have had to have been a rogue wave. So with that, then you can imagine that there were 2 people. The 2, MacArthur was in the tower. The other 2 were maybe on their way down to the mooring, or they were off securing some other things, but they were up on the plateau. They were up on the bluff. And then that monster wave came, and then MacArthur saw that they were in trouble and went out, and either another wave happened or he got pulled in by that wave because he didn't realize that it was actually a wave that was taller than the fucking lighthouse. Now, that theory was challenged for a long time because, again, the idea of a wave over 100 feet seemed impossible, even though some had been kind of in that same region. But in the 1950s, a lightkeeper named Walter Aldebert had become obsessed with this case. A lot of people had, but he was so obsessed, he ended up being stationed at the light on Eileen Moor for 4 years. And he just stared out the window day after day, looking at the sea. He walked the grounds. He would watch the weather patterns. He'd look at the passing ships. He looked for anything, even things of an uncanny or paranormal nature. He looked for everything. And ultimately, he leaned toward the massive wave theory because he had seen some gnarly ones, but he still didn't think waves that size were possible in that location. So he started spending a lot of his time by the edge of the bluff during these huge storms with his camera. And he ended up, after weeks or months, getting 30 rolls of film that proved that not only was waves this size possible, it actually happened all the time. And
wow.
This is interesting because one of the many ancient legends tied to these islands were of these blue man-fish hybrid sort of creatures that lived in the waters just below the cliffs. And the legend was when there was a passing ship coming by, they fought through like poetry or wordplay or songs. And if the blue men won, they created these ungodly massive waves that would crash over the ships and bring them to the bottom of the sea as their punishment. Of course, I don't think many peeps are going to buy the blue man theory and the modern sensibility, But what I thought was interesting is that it does illustrate that people of that area, even in pre-science Dark Ages days, way before the lighthouse, had these legends that made note that there are things happening on this island and around this island that should not or could not happen anywhere else. And I thought that was really intriguing, because now we would call something like this a rare natural occurrence of a convergence of landscape, weather, geography, or whatever. But back then we explained things through monsters, ghosts, and demons and miracles, So in the end, I thought in a strange sort of way, even the simplest and probably the most likely theory about what happened is still somewhat tied to the legend and mystique that had been associated with the Flannan Islands for centuries.
I really like how you put the Blue Man Group in there.
Yeah, well, they're playing in Las Vegas now. So some say a myth, some say playing in 8 minutes.
I'm pretty sure they're playing in 8 minutes. They're real.
Well, if all of this isn't enough for a good tale, we aren't quite done yet, because in the 1940s, there was a crew stationed at Eilean Mor, and one of them had come down with a pretty gnarly flu. And another one of them had just become so agitated, and he was just like losing his shit, that the third crew member had to tie him up. So this poor bastard was all left to his own devices to run the entire lighthouse for almost a week. But the relief ship arrived a few days down the road, and they all recovered, likely after getting away from the mercury. But this led some people to wonder if something like this could have been the setup to what happened to the 1900 crew. In other words, one of them went mad, killed the others in some sort of fit. Maybe it was MacArthur, and he saw a chance to push the other two off the cliff. And he didn't grab his coat because he wasn't in his right mind. He was going to do a murder after being mercury insaned. And maybe he jumped off because he was crazy. Maybe he fell off. Maybe they pulled him over. Who knows? But that's one that got ascribed to it after the fact. But even more intriguing than that is, so right after the disappearance of the 3 men, the relief lightkeeper, as I mentioned, was Joseph Moore. And he had to stay on and work at the light, knowing that his comrades had just vanished. And he did not like it. He did not want to. I mean, put yourself in that position. And yeah, you're a hardened man of the sea. But imagine actually having to walk into that empty thing, the coat's still hanging there. No one knows what the fuck happened. You're reading these log entries, and you have to just go on without your chums there. He was part of the crew. He just wasn't scheduled to be there yet. He constantly put in requests to be transferred elsewhere. And a few months later, he got that wish. But a year or so later, the lightkeeper who replaced Moore was back at Eilean Mor and cleaning the light room when he inexplicably just fell off the tower to his death. And interestingly, around that same time, you remember William Ross? He was the guy that was originally supposed to be on Eilean Mor, but he got sick, and MacArthur took his place. He was working at a different lighthouse when he just inexplicably dropped dead in front of the other crew. So, I don't know, some Final Destination-esque
for
shit.
sure.
So that's basically it. Most people think that one way or the other, they were either blown or washed away into the sea. There are a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of weird things. And so they did make a movie based on this called The Vanishing, and that's not to be confused with the one from the 90s starring Kiefer Sutherland. Remember that?
Yeah,
when
I'm
his
thinking of
wife,
it too, yeah.
Sandra Bullock, gets kidnapped. That movie's grim. I don't know if you remember it, but part of that was filmed where Twin Peaks was filmed in North Bend. But what's funny is that the gas station is still there. It's one of the main gas stations right in there on that off-ramp that a lot of people will refuel, get rid of a few road beers.
Yeah, it's right there by the outlet stores.
Yeah. There's 2 gas stations back to back, or facing each other, with a little road going between them. This one was the older one, but it's, to this day, as far as I know, I haven't been in there in years, but it's funny because
stop there all the time.
there's a little plaque and a little like photo and newspaper clipping or something back by the bathrooms, and they have this little story and write-up saying, "This is the gas station where Sandra Bullock got abducted from the movie The Vanishing in 1993." I just thought that was kind of a weird flex.
She was here.
Creepy gas station already was like, yeah, this is the one where someone was filmed being abducted. Have fun pumping your gas out there.
But she was here, but she was adopted. I like that.
But this movie, it seemed like a kind of an indie thing. I mean, it did have Gerard Butler. He was the only actor that I recognized. And I was curious which way they would take with it. And I won't tell you how they went. I can tell you that it surprised me. I was expecting them to go a very overly dramatic way. But the theory they came up with wasn't really anything that we've talked about, but I would like you guys to watch it. Yeah, I think it was on Amazon, wherever it is. Find it. It's a slow-paced, kind of an old-fashioned feel to the movie. So take your time with it, but I found it to be a pretty well-done film. I'm curious to learn more about it. It's called The Vanishing, and it looked like it was filmed out at Eileen Moore, but I guess it was filmed at a place that it just looks a lot like it. And some of the
pretty sure I've seen it. But
exteriors were shot at Eileen Moore, but you can. It's not very hospitable, but you can. People do still go out to the island and walk around. The lighthouse is still there. It's been automated. I don't know if it's even still being used, but if it is, it's being automated. The railroad track is still there. The original mooring is still there. Some of the bent up metal is still there. And, of course, the ancient little chapel that was there long before when all the sheep were grazing on magical grass. So anyway, there you have it. There's my big lighthouse show for you.
Man, that was good stuff. You do need to watch that, the Lighthouse movie, because I wondered if it was inspiration for this, or vice versa.
Well, I wondered if they were going to tackle any of the things that are from some of these well-known legends.
I think they did. They took, I think, a few things and melded them together. That's why I was like, man, this reminds me of the Lighthouse.
But I wanted to see it. I wanted to show it at. I think I got the rights to show it at Radar when it was still in theater, but then Radar went away. And then Sour Grapes.
It's weird. It's a fucking weird flick that doesn't always make sense, but it's beautiful, and I think the acting is phenomenal, and it definitely makes you go, what the fuck, a lot. So, yeah.
I like that kind of thing.
I have a secret movie that I really enjoyed that was called Darkness Falls.
I like that one with the Tooth Fairy.
I really like that a lot. I didn't like the Tooth Fairy whole thing about it. I didn't mind what they did with it.
Yeah,
but just that movie.
Familiar about that.
Awesome. It was one about the woman that was burned to death in a lighthouse, and then she, I think that was what. And then she comes and haunts the kids of all the people in the town when they lose their food. Yeah,
if you see her when she comes to visit you at night, she'll kill you.
I don't think I've seen it. I must have heard you guys talking about it, or someone else talking about it.
Is the main character becomes what do you call them when they can't sleep?
Insomniac.
He's an insomniac, but he has tendencies to have night terrors. So all his life he's been like dealing with night terrors and all this stuff. And it's a fucking really cool story. I really
check it out because I'm all about. I'm painting a lighthouse right now.
Oh, you should.
I'm painting a lighthouse with giant tentacles attacking it.
Check that one out. That's a good one.
Yeah, I'll check that out. You guys check out The Vanishing. I think you'll dig it.
My story. I wrote it down. I'm gonna definitely check that out. My story was really close to your last story, but it wasn't the whole deal. So this lighthouse is out like in the ocean. So you have to trek out there to get out there. And it's built on these rocks, obviously, you have to boat to it where you would tie off and then go up to the lighthouse. And so what happened was it was similar to your last story. They were trying to make communications with this lighthouse and they couldn't. There are 3 people working there, and they didn't get nobody. So that's what made it so strange. So they sent out a boat to go look out and check on them. There's a goodwill check, so see what's up. And as they got there, they noticed that there was a big old giant boulder, like rock, that was washed up onto the shore. And a lot of the metal, around where you would dock was, torn and ripped off. And so what they did is they walked up through, and I mean, that's the most they could see as they could assess it, right? And they get up to the lighthouse, and it's even at the base of the lighthouse where if like it was a giant wave, there would be disturbances. there was breakfast was made, dined out, dished out on plates, plated out, untouched.
I think what where you saw this sounds like one of the versions of this story, because that popped up from time to time, and that's another thing that the poet mentioned, that their table was set, but no one had eaten yet.
Well, nobody was there.
Yeah.
So what happened is that they got the journal, and they said, yeah, we had these giant storms that came in. We're lucky we didn't get pushed off the island. Blah blah blah. Thank God to be alive. It lasted say a week long or whatever, and then just went dry. There was nothing left in the journal.
Yeah.
And so what they did is they cross-membered the times they said it was storming in that vicinity, and they couldn't find it. These people that came to check on them, it was calm. The whole ocean was calm.
Yeah.
During those times. So whatever it was could have been a freak of any kind of nature. We look and we gawk about like the Bermuda Triangle and ley lines that come across. Ley lines are on the land, but they also are in the ocean. So you never know. A lot of people kind of consume that's what the Bermuda Triangle is just ley lines that intersect. And who knows? We could time travel here. Or maybe it bends space and time in this specific area with where we are and out there in space.
Well, think of all the freak things that do happen that we know about, and you got to imagine there are way more freak things that happen that we've never witnessed, or we don't have concrete evidence that it happened. So yeah, it is. You mentioned the weather with the Eileen Moore story. Some reports said that the local weather of that part of Scotland was calm all of those days. Other reports said that it had been stormy. So there are some things that have just been added to the story. All we really know about that particular case is, the crew went there and they disappeared. And these are the theories. Obviously, I didn't mention ghosts. There's one legend that goes when Moore was walking up to the lighthouse, he saw 3 birds instead of like gulls everywhere or no birds. It was usually one or the other. He saw 3 black birds staring at him in a pitiful way. And so obviously that was one of the theories, that they had been turned into birds.
The impression of it's a biblical thing called
this was the
Trinity, the Trinity of Christ.
This was a very superstitious time, and this was an incredibly superstitious and very strange part of the world. So, and superstition in seafaring world is, you can't really ignore it, even to avoid it, even to this day. But
well, being a boat owner, I got it. After being for 1 year, I got it. I was like, Jesus,
right? You don't want to sink her.
Oh, you could definitely sink. There's no question about that. My boat, and the best thing about my boat is it's a Boston whaler. They're unsinkable. So by that,
boy, didn't we call the Titanic that? I think someone's asking for trouble.
Well, what it is you got fiberglass bottom, and then you got 3 or 4 inches of foam, and then you got another fiberglass top. So it's sandwiched in between the two, fiberglasses. It's foam. Mm-hmm. So you could literally I could run fucking whatever. I could run some shit right through that thing, and it's still gonna float.
Yeah.
But I still, in my mindset, while I was boating around, the butt of my boat is only maybe 2 feet in the water at the most, and there's some shallow. If you're not really aware of what the Columbia River does out in front of here, in front of the mighty Wenatchee, it's actually super shallow on the Wenatchee side. It's more deep on the East Wenatchee side. It'll go, 60, 70 feet. It's not even that deep. And then, because I was looking at my fish finder, and I was I could look over the board and see tires. I don't know. I want to say 70 feet out from the shoreline of where they do the fireworks.
Yeah.
So I'm clear out there, almost in the middle of the river. But I look down, and it's only 5 feet deep.
I don't know why it always kind of creeped me out.
weird
to see the bottom on fish finders. You know, to see that like that sonar. And you're just like, oh, that's the shape of what is beneath us. I don't know why.
Oh, this
I didn't find that comforting.
No, I got a real good one. I was trying to see if I could see bikes if I went underneath the walking bridge and see if you could see like wheels and stuff off of bikes that people are just thrown overboard the walk bridge there. But I didn't. You can see the big
probably whole cars.
Probably.
Well, looking at the clock, we're looking pretty good to get on to some weird trivia, unless anyone had something quick they wanted to toss out.
Now
or talk about how many times you guys have listened to the new Tay Swift, huh?
Taylor Swift
rotation. I've been going on a lot of walks lately.
That's so weird, dude.
It's good walking.
I remember.
Hey, you think it's weird? It's weird for me.
No, I remember 4 years ago you talked shit about that. Oh, I don't like my girls looking like Taylor Swift and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah.
I don't think I would ever have said, I don't like
pretty.
my girls looking like Taylor Swift.
I've heard it before, Ron.
First of all, she's cute, but I don't, that just didn't sound like something I would say.
You weren't attracted to him.
Well,
that's what I was like, that's a weird thing to say.
Like 10 years ago. I mean, what was she, 19? How old is she now? I have no idea how. We've talked about this. Like, 20 years ago or something, I'd look at a 20-year-old and I'd be like, damn. Now I look at a 25-year-old, I'm like, why aren't you in school? Like, that extra 10, 15 years of me getting older. Maybe we should mention
Leonardo DiCaprio.
I'm just going to say we should mention he's got a new gal pal. Okay, look, I get it. It's legal. But I don't know, man. When you are a celebrity especially, you have so many eyes on you.
46. 48? How old is he?
I feel like we looked it up. I think we're about the same age. I think he might be a little younger.
I think he's 48 or 47. He is.
Okay. Well, that's my age.
Yeah.
Are you dating a 19?
He just started dating a 19. No, when I was 40, I did date a couple, quote unquote. I had, brief encounters with some early 20-somethings, but they were all, closer to 25 than 20.
Sure.
But they could go to a bar. I mean, this is always baffles me. Is like, how weird would that feel to be dating somebody at our age?
I did it.
To be dating someone that can't go to a bar. What do you mean you did it?
Not that. I was going to say dating girls that are older than me. A lot of my big thing was I was dating chicks that were like 10 years older than me. So when I was in my 30s, I was dating girls that were in their 40s. And no regret.
Cool.
But you know what's funny is like there was a lot of I would say 10 years out of high school that our friends that got with a lot of teachers that we had in school. Like they would be at the bar and like so-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so was at the bar. And next thing you know, he took off with her and we asked him what the fuck happened the next day. And he's like, oh, dude, I beat that shit up so bad. Oh, and you're like, what? Shut up. Pictures that never happened. And we all saw the pictures.
Yeah. So it happened. It did happen. It sounds like some guy shit right there. Crazy. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's an odd thing because it is legal, right? But it is. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't get the appeal.
He's just making a real name.
And he's going younger and younger. So where's this going to stop, Leo?
Yeah, that's weird. That's weird, man.
I think it is weird.
For Leo.
I think dabbling with younger people than you here and there is... look, even falling in love with someone who's significantly younger than you, and it happens. But I think for the most part...
to see a type, like a consistent trend. Yeah.
Well, it's not like we're talking about a 64-year-old and a 28-year-old. We're talking about someone who can't go to a bar.
This person... Her high school education was interrupted by COVID.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah, that should be, should I date this gal or no?
But he's openly dating her, huh?
I don't know. They've been seen in public together. Whatever. It's such fucking gossip, but it's so stupid. All right, let's take a quick break before we get on to some weird trip. Well, I was ready to do this.
You're saying?
Boop things.
Saying it faster helps. now you're late and off rhythm.
That sounds like my sex life. Late and off rhythm. Okay.
All right.
All right, guys. I feel pretty good about this round. I had a little fun writing this one. Let's dive right in. Question 1. The Senate in Indiana just passed a new bill into law making something that was once legal, something that was once not legal, legal. One, many people say should have been passed long ago. Others are left scratching their heads, however. What did the Senate in Indiana just vote to legalize? Is it A, snorting refined sugars?
Oh, yeah. Oh, God. Got to get up in the morning, drink my coffee, and snort my sugar.
Let's take that off the books.
Legal. We're legal.
Is it B, ninja stars?
Oh, goddamn right. Shurikens with
boy, we got in trouble throwing them. Remember the magazines you could get and order all that shit as a kid?
My dad fucking confiscated mine, and now he's got them pinned up on his wall.
Like,
I'm like, I remember that. That's mine.
You could just order shit. You just be a 9-year-old and order knives and
nunchucks.
Yeah, I got to the gas station to get that stuff.
Oh no, this is in the back of
the
Marshall art ads. In the Marshall magazines.
Fucking great. I should look up archive.org and find some of those old magazines.
I'm pretty sure they probably had like fucking shrooms and shit you could buy on there.
Yeah.
Just be part of the Ninja Hood all together.
There's always like a blow up doll or two and that kind of thing. Yeah, even for kids, even a kid.
Not for fucking Chris.
Well,
perfect. Gotcha. Was it C? They legalized marriage to a cousin, so long as it's not your first cousin, though.
I thought that's why we started Shelbyville. So we could marry our cousins.
Or is it D? They legalized mowing your lawn before February 1st.
Oh, wow.
One of these things is true.
I remember doing an episode of Weird Laws, and there's nothing you could think of that's too weird to not be a law somewhere in this country.
Indeed.
This is tough, though.
Again,
quick roundup.
What do they? Snorting refined sugars, ninja throwing stars, marriage to a cousin, so long as it's not a first cousin, or mowing your lawn before February 1st.
I'm torn between the cousin and the lawn. I don't know which one I'm going to sleep on tonight, but I think I'm going to...
You one of them cousin fuckers there.
I do like, my childhood is all wrapped up in ninja stars. And we threw ninja stars with my cousins, but I never wanted to marry them. I'm tempted to go with Mary.
Thank God. It's the only thing stuck in your cousin was the throwing star, if you know what I'm saying.
God, the mowing the lawn one is super random. Before February 1st, was that it?
Yeah.
Fuck. My heart wants to marry my cousin, but my my gut wants to mow the lawn in Feb. Well, in January.
What are you going with?
I'm going with D.
You're going with the lawn mow.
Yeah.
I like it. All right, John Mark.
Where was this again?
Indiana.
I'll go with the cousins.
Oh, good.
All right, Lyle.
Sorry, Indiana. Any listeners we have in Indiana? I'm not disparaging you. It's just
like joke's on you. We've been able to marry our cousins forever.
Yeah. Hey, we could fuck like animals up here.
Well, anyone can, but
what's his name?
Get caught.
Hands, old Hands.
Oh, Mr. Hands. Yeah, it didn't end well for him.
It did not. So I wouldn't recommend it. I'm gonna go with the strong mowing your lawn. It doesn't make sense, but Indiana's kind of like it's in an area where you might be hitting an early spring, if you know what I'm talking about. And people are kind of assholes, and they probably don't like the noise disturbances.
Yeah, that was kind of my thinking too.
So we'll do with it.
Let's give one less month a year where we have to hear a lawnmower. But I always like the sound of a lawnmower. I don't know, there's something kind of timeless about it.
I think we all got screwed this year for when it came to snow, because like we had no fall. I go up to my parents' house and they got like literally a foot of leaves now that all the snow melted away.
And then there was a few leaves that fell, and then those got covered with snow and ice. And once that melted, now it's just the most slippery, gross, sludgy, muddy leaves underneath it. It's bullshit. What's funny, though, is like we got our first big wind yesterday or the day before in a long time, and it looked like autumn because there's still so many leaves everywhere.
I got
just blowing leaves all over the place. It was weird.
I got that feeling today when I was coming home from a dialysis. I'm like, you know what? It feels like fall. It's the weirdest thing.
Okay. So whose turn is it?
D.
Where are you going, Lyle? Oh, you went. Oh, that's right.
We're on to question 2. Here's some fun trivia. We're all musicians here. By far. Now, I'll tell you what. I'm going to make this worth a bonus point if you guys want to guess with the text to me before I read the answers here. Okay. And if you get that right, I will give you a bonus point on top of if you get it right. It'll still be 2. But what is, by far, the best-selling instrument in the entire world?
Dun, dun, dun,
it's going to be something.
You might be surprised. I'll read you some answers here, but send me a text and if you get it right. Yeah. If you want a bonus point, you don't have to.
I feel like
but
this
if you
is
think you know what it is,
on the nose, but
I do.
Text her.
Trying to
I'm
find.
Gonna go with it.
Maybe you need to message me more, John Mark.
Yeah, he was
stop
only 12 down in my scroll
all the time.
Oh, I see. Ron just said an emoji. Like a fucking millennial.
I didn't mean to, but it was there, and I was like,
oh,
there we go.
Well, that's cool.
Oh, that's some good guesses here.
I mean, I went so on the nose.
You did. But, I mean, Lyle, you sending something over, buddy? There we are.
I'm trying.
Oh, interesting.
Well, you know what it is, Chris?
Okay.
It's like they have so many keys of it, so you can't just have one.
I know. Let me go over the answers, Lyle. Calm your titties down for a second. Jesus, fuck. All right.
Second cup of coffee.
John Mark said violin.
Ooh.
Ronster said guitar, and Lyle said harmonica. Now let me go over the answers here, and I'll let you take a guess. Was it A, bongos?
Bong, bong, bong.
B, the piano?
The keys.
C, the ukulele?
Ukulele.
Or
very popular.
D, the harmonica?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, there's only one that translated from the guesses.
That's true.
Does that matter?
Does that mean he got it?
So was the question that this is most popular of all time and the most popular like right now?
The best-selling musical instrument in the entire world.
Most sold.
So that implies like forever.
I believe so. Well, just
just currently.
Yeah,
I don't. Whatever.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah. They're all fairly modern takes on ancient instruments. Well, God, ukuleles are everywhere now. That's why I'm curious if this is a new thing because ukuleles are cheap, they're portable, they're easy to fit in a kid's hands. So everyone's buying their kids ukuleles. But I am tempted to go with the classic piano.
Pianist.
Although that is super expensive, super big, hard to learn.
When I say piano, too, I mean keyboard. Like a piano instrument.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't gotta be no baby grand.
That changes a lot. Yeah, I'm gonna go with keyboard, piano.
Yeah.
Side by side on my piano, keyboard. Oh Lord.
Yeah. Now that you codified that a little bit, I'm gonna have to go with keyboard as well.
It's really interesting if
because if I was thinking if it was literally just pianos and pianos are big. Expensive, so
yeah. But I had a Casio keyboard when I was like 8 years old. Probably cost me
harmonicas are like you can just slip them in your pocket. They're pretty cheap.
But I never see anyone playing harmonica.
But that's the thing. So yeah, keyboard.
But we, you got to think the whole world.
All right, Lyle, are you sticking with your original answer? Or are you going to deviate?
I'm gonna tell you a story about a keyboard in the house. Keyboard in the house. I'm going to tell you that obviously, like harmonicas, they're all made in the key of.
It's true.
Right? So you could have 12 of them.
I've got like 8.
I only had, I had like 3, but I didn't know that. And then they're probably like all the same fucking key.
Yeah.
Years ago, because my aunt, she got me in music, and I've since kind of bypassed her a lot. But she used to kind of teach me how to play the harmonica. old school style, like Zeppelin style. But I mean, look at Bruce Willis. He's awesome. He plays
many
harmonica.
well-known harmonica players. It's an interesting instrument, and most people that we know when we think of that are harmonica players, they're not really playing the harmonica all that. Like Bob Dylan can't really play the harmonica all that well.
Can't really fucking sing either.
Bruce doesn't really play it all that well, But then you got people like the Blues Traveler. That's just like, okay, he plays it amazingly, but it's like, knock it off. Like everything sounds like, it's like everything's Figaro. Yeah, this is interesting.
Yeah, let's find out.
So wait, did Lyle go with key? Did you
tune
go
in
with
next
piano?
week?
I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you where Lyle ended up.
Where'd you handle Lyle's to, Lyle?
Harmonica.
You're going to stay with the harmonica.
So if he guessed keyboard and keyboard was right, would he? Oh no! If he guessed keyboard and got harmonica right, would you still give him 1 point?
Yeah,
you'd have to get both of them right.
You would have to. No, I'd give him. If he got it right, I'll give him a bonus point. And if he guessed, but you went with harmonica, right? You're guessing and you okay. So
either way.
Okay. Question 3. God, I love this one. Fuck, I forgot I have a picture for this. I gotta look up for you guys. Okay. Football may be over for the Seahawks this year, but we have so much to look forward to next year. In fact, as I was watching some Seahawks stuff, I ran across a piece of info recently about a musician who sadly is no longer with us that incredulously was a huge Seahawks fan. And I've got photo evidence to back this up now. Who was a huge 12? It's pretty fucking surprising. Was it A, Freddie Mercury?
Galileo.
Okay.
See
a little interception and a bad pass.
Was it B, Meatloaf?
Oh, I would do anything for a Super Bowl.
But I won't throw good.
Yeah, but I won't run the ball on 3rd and 1.
And I can't cross the damn finish line.
I hope
It'll never not hurt.
Yeah, every
not
time.
Fucking hurt.
Every time. Was it Prince?
Ow. Wow. Why can't I think of this? This is what it sounds like when the Hawks lose. Turn off the tune. It didn't happen.
Oh, man.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many Hawks games I turned off this season. So I can't. I'm done.
I don't think it was Russell's fault.
Later. Well, it wasn't.
Or was it?
Certainly wasn't this year.
Was it D, Eddie fucking Money?
Oh, boy. Okay. This is interesting. I feel like I have seen a photo of both not Eddie Money.
What?
There's something familiar about Prince. I have a hard time buying that. I don't know that Prince was. I feel like he was at a halftime show here and there. Maybe he wasn't.
Oh my goodness, dude! He did a halftime show one time.
Oh, that's right. He was like the
fucking amazing.
That doesn't mean he's a football fan, but
no, it rained on him. They did Purple Rain.
Vikings. I mean, it's purple.
It
rained. Minnesota.
It was like Jesus. Like, was he up? Here you go, buddy.
I feel like I have seen Freddie Mercury in a Seahawks thing, but I could be making that up. But I also feel like I have seen Meatloaf wearing a Seahawks thing. That would have been more recent, of course, probably when they were in the Super Bowl. I'm torn between Freddie and Meat. Mercury and the Meat. 2 things we talked about on this program tonight. I'm going to go with Freddie Mercury only because there's this image in my head, but I don't know if I saw it or where I saw it.
You're going Freddie Mercury?
Yeah, and even then, he could have just been wearing a thing. But you're saying whoever this was a known fan.
Yeah, there. Okay. I found a collage of multiple photos of them in Seahawk garb.
Oh,
yeah.
Huh.
All right.
Okay. Well, I'm sticking. I mean, I don't know, so I'm sticking with Freddie.
Okay. John Mark.
Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like
that's as good a guess as any, so I'll go with Freddie Mercury too.
Freddie too. Okay. Lyle.
Oh.
No one chasing Eddie Money yet, huh?
Yeah, I can't.
Weird.
Well,
y'all be sorry.
Not yet.
We fucking might. He seems more logical than Freddie or Meat. Or Freddie or Prince, for sure.
No, you wouldn't see Prince from changing his name to any time in that whole category.
Seahawks logo.
Wearing any kind of Seahawks or any kind of NFL garb.
No, he doesn't dress. He doesn't wear that kind of shit anyway.
Beneath him, he'd be like, psst.
Yeah, no. He's not a pop culture clothing kind of guy.
No, he's got see-through guitars, man. He wouldn't. No. So that leaves
That'd be amazing.
Meatloaf. I can't see Meatloaf doing it either. I think he's more East Coast. I don't think he's West Coast.
Well, yeah.
And then
but you don't get further East Coast than Freddie Mercury.
No.
Or what was D? Oh, what was D?
Down. He's down. Going down.
It's probably fucking Eddie Money. Goddammit.
I'm gonna go with Eddie. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take the little.
He was a California guy, right? I'd guess.
Taking the bait, the money bait.
Yeah, it happens. There's a
it would help to know where he was from. He's probably from like Colorado or something.
Yeah, Alice Cooper's main guitarist right now, the lead guitarist, is a female, and she's from I don't know if she's from here, but I've met her cousin at the radar station, and she's a huge Seahawks fan. Huge. Mm-hmm. And you won't and what is it, Nia? Or what is it?
She's fine.
You know what I'm talking about, Chris?
I'm pretty sure she quit Alice Cooper, but
she just quit recently.
But her name is what? Nina Strauss or something? It's Nina.
That sounds
Nina
kind of correct.
Yeah. I feel bad. Botched.
I got to get this moving, guys. Sorry.
All right.
So wait. I think you went with Eddie Money.
All right. Yep. All right. Question 4. Pam Anderson recently released a memoir, and in it, she described the moment she knew her and her, I don't know if they were married or just together, Kid Rock. You know, they were together for a while.
Yeah.
Kid Rock. The moment she knew they were going to have to break up, they were at a house party enjoying a movie at a celebrity's house. The movie upset Kid Rock, who she called Bob throughout the whole memoir. Upset Bob very much, caused an argument between himself and her. He stormed out of the house and left Pamela at the party to find her own ride home. What movie caused Kid Rock to go all bow with the bow to gonna find a figgity ride for yourself, Pam?
Bow with a bow to find your own way home. Diggy.
Better jump on that
Call
bus
up
right
the
now.
lawyer.
What was the movie that caused the outrage?
Interesting.
Was it The Passion of the Christ?
Oh, Jesus. He's got that long hair.
Wait a minute. Bob is the one who got angry, not Pam.
Yes.
Okay.
They caused an argument.
Insulted.
Okay.
Was it B, The Notebook?
Here's what I found.
That's my watch.
No. He's like, which one of you is cheating? Here's what I found on that question you're trying to cheat on.
Was it C, Borat, Cultural Learnings of America for Make Benefit Glorious Nation of Kazakhstan?
Okay. We're getting somewhere.
Or was it D, School of Rock?
Oh, man.
Huh.
Maybe because he felt like he should be in that movie?
He was like, this isn't real rock.
Well, that's the thing.
That's
You
not
gotta.
I am the kid of rock.
I was going to start my actual School of Rock, and you ruined it. Now it's got to be School of Bob. Well, that's the thing. You have to go through these one by one to figure out to try to figure out what would upset Bob.
Yeah. Well, again,
what about this, Bob?
The Passion of the Christ, The Notebook, Borat, or School of Rock?
Well, it's pretty clear that Chris Rock is a conservative. Now, that doesn't automatically make him religious, but I don't know what you would get mad at either way with the Passion of the Christ.
Yeah.
What was B? I'm sorry, you just said it.
No, The Notebook.
Notebook, really, I don't get, but that could be one to chase. Borat makes sense because he's a conservative, and a lot of Borat and what Sasha does is politically based and not necessarily in the vein that one kid Bob would appreciate. And School of Rock is funny, but I think you might have thrown that one in there because it had the word rock in it. Could be wrong. That could also be what pissed him off about it. I got to go with... Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm getting really confused on why he would get upset at all when he has Pamela Anderson next to him. Why watch the movie, play with some boobage,
Watch the movie, play with some boobie.
Yeah.
And you're
Dad, old classic adage. Dude, how many bad movies did we sit through, especially when we were young, just so we could cop a feel or get close to a woman. We didn't care what we were fucking watching. Come on, Bob.
Excuse me.
Deeper in that popcorn jug, lady.
Leonardo
I shouldn't have got it a jumbo.
Powerpuff Girls and shit.
Oh my God. That's what he's watching. Oh man.
I'm gonna go with Borat, even though I think that's the one that's kind of on the nose. No pun intended. If you think about one particular scene in that movie, I'm torn between Borat and The Notebook, just because maybe he thought I could see him saying The Notebook was gay. Something like that. That sounds like Bob. But I think I'm gonna go with Borat. I think that's a safer bet.
Okay.
This is interesting.
John Mark.
I tried to watch her biography on Netflix, but I found it kind of boring.
I was wondering about that.
She naked?
Well, I turned it off after 15 minutes. It was just
I don't want to
wasn't in the mood.
Spoil things for you, Lau, but you can find her naked everywhere.
Wait,
you don't want to.
Wait, you can't.
No. Yeah.
Can you imagine if you could see her fucking? Wouldn't that be amazing if we had some sort of
what I wouldn't give to see her boobs just once.
Just out in the
like
water.
on a boat.
Or, on a Tuesday.
Goodness. Oh my goodness.
What are you going with, John Mark?
I
think I might go with Borat as well.
Okay.
I don't
Put you
see,
down.
yeah, I don't see the Borat thing. Just for one, because Bob he's a huge fucking pot smoker. If you're a pot smoker, you can't laugh at
He's
that
an odd
shit.
dude. Yeah, it's hard to put. It'd be hard to peg him. Be hard to peg Bob.
If I was high as fuck, I'd be laughing my ass off watching Borat.
But some of the shit he says is like crazy, like right wing, and then some of it's like, yeah, I'm right with what he just said there. Doesn't seem like he's across the board one way or the other, but he's really associated himself with some dingleberries.
I think Hank Williams was probably there, and that's why he got all upset by Passion of the Christ, because he's like, Hank, it can't be true. He didn't die for our sins, did he? And you're like, Bob, yes, he did, Bob. God damn it, Bob, you better.
Goddamn right he did.
Mother
Bob.
of analysis right
so
here.
So he goes, well, fine, I'm going to go find him and tell him what kind of bad thing. You're going to have to find a ride home. I'm going to go find Jesus.
No idea what you're talking about.
So where are you going?
And that's how it happened.
That's how it happened, John Mark. It seems pretty clear to me. So you going with Passion of the Christ?
Jesus. Passion of the Christ.
Jim Caviezel played Jesus.
It's all Jesus.
We love white people playing. I guess what is he, Italian maybe? I don't know what his heritage is. He ain't Jewish. Well,
I think he is.
Or is he Jewish? Well, Caviezel does sound Jewish, doesn't it? You remember that story? I probably bring it up from time to time on the show when he has family or friends in Wenatchee. He comes here quite a bit.
Yeah.
And he was riding his motorbike over the passes, and some crazy dude on the side of the road was riding a pedal bike.
Oh.
And he just got off his pedal bike and threw it at this dude coming down the road on his motorbike and caused him to crash and get pretty hurt. Well, that was Jim Caviezel.
The guy on the motorbike or the guy who threw
The
the
guy
bike?
on the motorbike.
Oh, it was Jim Caviezel?
Yeah, you can look that story up.
Who's that?
He was on his way to see some peeps in Wenatchee.
The Kid Rock.
All right.
Bob?
Let's see how we did. Let's see how we Bob what the Bob did.
I wouldn't be surprised if Bob lived in Wenatchee. At least in the
Wouldn't that be funny? What if he's actually in that song going, Baba da Baba danga dangity? He's like trying to talk to himself. Like, Bob, remember this?
Bob.
Bob.
Bang, bang,
Okay.
bang, yeah.
That's a tough little get, you know?
Yeah, it sounds like it.
It's a hidden trick.
All right, let's see how you guys did here. Question 1. The Senate in Indiana just legalized ninja throwing stars. Yeah.
Should have
Finally,
chased the childhood hearing.
Yeah, you should have. I thought that was pretty funny and stupid.
Also, I wonder if they were ever legal here.
Double-edged knives
kids,
or not. They
throwing
go by
knives, probably not, yeah.
blade length. So, well, there you go with the throwing knives.
I mean, lawn darts got it banned, I'm sure.
So throwing stars, I don't know.
Maybe you could order the hard rubber ones. Those were legal. We'd throw those at each other's faces all day and all night.
Do you remember the
Ninja
fucking blow darts that would have probably took your eye out?
No, I didn't have one.
Dude, they were like blow darts. You know, they had a tip. You blew it with
blow
a straw.
darts by Mattel.
They're blow darts. Poof. But like if one hits you in the eyeball, you're fucked, son.
Mm-hmm.
You're not getting that out.
Junior's
question.
first bag of glass shards.
Right.
Go ahead, Chris.
Question 2. Best-selling instrument in the entire world by far is the harmonica.
Fucking
Wow.
Yeah.
I think Lau might be onto something though, because you don't just buy one.
Yeah, well,
A lot of us
not only
in the
that,
house.
it's fucking $5 for a harmonica. My kid has one.
Yeah.
You know, like my kid doesn't have any of the other
Yeah.
things. I mean, they're cheap, they're accessible, they're small, they're
they
portable.
make noise.
Anyone can play one. You guys were onto it. So
Yeah.
yeah, by far, Lyle, you're gonna get 2 points for that, making you
Damn.
right in the lead right now.
I feel like Bob.
Yeah, you should.
Two to zip zip. Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, 2-zip.
Orange
All right,
out.
guys. This famous musician who's no longer with us was once a Big 12, apparently. I have just one photo here. Maybe the one you were talking about, Ron. It was indeed Freddie Mercury. But I did find a collage of photos with him with like his various like 12 gear. It was cool.
I
mean, it wasn't
imagine when
12
I
gear back
saw
then,
that, that's such a rad jacket.
but- Yeah, it's cool,
It's
huh?
like silver sleeved, so 70s,
Yeah.
with the old logo. So he was actually a fan. Any
Yeah, that's by all
story on
accounts.
how he became a fan?
I didn't dive deep enough to do it, but I saw enough photos to know it had to have been a real thing. So I'll try to look
Crazy.
that up for.
Is that
I'd
page
like to
behind
know.
him?
I don't know.
It's
No, I think
looks
that's
like a page behind.
All right, let's see here. So Ron, John Mark with
from-
a point a pop, and Lyle with 2 points. We're going to move on to question 4. See what happens here. Pam Anderson released a memoir recently, and she described the moment she knew her marriage or relationship, I can't recall which it is, to Kid Rock or Bob was over. She was at a party for a screening of a new movie she happened to have a small cameo in. Hold on a second. Alexa, stop! All right, buddy, go brush your teeth.
I can't
Full
do
blast.
anything right.
Alexis, full blast.
All right.
Turn off the lights, Alexis.
The movie she had a brief cameo in was. Sorry, everything's melting down at one fucking moment over here
That's
right
how it
now.
goes.
Logan,
It
go
always-
upstairs and brush your teeth. You can take those to bed. Yes.
Always comes at
That's
once.
why I hate that. Fuck.
You're
I
waking, go into Nani's, and then you're going to your mom's. Yep. I'll come. Yes, we'll take that in the morning, dude. Go brush your teeth. I'll be up in a
Alexa,
minute, okay?
punish child.
Alexa, take care of my child so I can do this.
What level of pain? 1 or 5? Which one's
Trying to
worse?
do it. Cool. Yeah. Okay. The movie was Borat.
Oh,
She
nice.
had a
Okay.
cameo in Borat where he tried to kidnap her, and then they talked about her porno movie, like on a RV. A couple of college kids were talking about her porno movie, and they play it for a second. And Kid Rock saw this and called her a whore and stormed out.
Wow.
It's 'cause
The
it was
party.
Oh, come on, Bob.
Which
A little baby.
John, Ron and John Mark got that correct. We have a 3-way tie. This doesn't happen very often. So, Lyle, since you were so fucking good and on the nose about the musical instrument question, I'm going to let you pick between the tiebreaker topics here.
Okay, all right.
9/11 or Elvis Presley.
Oh, what you talking about?
Oh, shit.
Oh man.
Tiebreaker. Which
The
category?
fuel doesn't melt, still beams.
Oh, was it a bomb or a plane?
It all fell down. Whoa.
That baby said. Oh, now I better stop.
How come it imploded and didn't explode? I'm gonna go.
We're going to
Let's
hell.
go. I really shouldn't, but I mean, we did say that at one point in time we'd do a 9/11 show. So I mean, to have a
As close as
9/11
we'll get.
question,
Okay.
this close was great. Take what we can get, kids.
Yeah.
I'm doing it for you guys.
Yeah. Well,
All right, here's the question. And you have to send me your answer. Closest answer wins here. Almost every single window in the Twin Towers shattered when they fell. How many windows did the Twin Towers actually have?
yikes.
Both buildings
of them
together, or
collectively.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh no!
Good lord. There's going to be one where if I'm off, I'm probably way the fuck off. But
It's hard. It's hard. It's a big number, but I think it seems real.
I
Yeah.
don't want to take forever with it. So there's my
Oh,
case.
interesting so far. Oh wow. And we're just waiting on
People don't think about it. I mean, if you look at like Chris's house, he's got probably like you got over 12 windows probably in your house.
Oh, I've got like 40 windows in my house.
Yeah,
Like
so it's
12
like-
in just my living room.
And-
Interesting. Oh, you fucking idiots. All right. All right. Ron says 12. Excuse me.
Oh, God.
Yeah, Lyle said to the group, which is why I'm always like, Lyle.
I thought it was
Direct me.
Well, we'd already
Lyle went with 12,000. Ron went with 20,000. John Mark went with 20,000.
Shit.
The answer was 40,000.
Oh,
My.
we got to
So
do
guess
another
what? We're doing a
tiebreaker.
second tiebreaker. How do we feel about Elvis?
Oh, sorry, Lyle.
Elvis.
Let's do Elvis.
Okay. Now this is since they were the ties, so now it's Ron and John Mark here. But Elvis Presley recorded more than 600 songs over his career. Wow. Of those 600 songs, how many did he write?
Oh,
interesting.
That's a good one.
Hi.
Sure.
Hi.
Well, a lot of artists made their debut, and I guess most of their money, like at their highest peak, by actually doing other people's stuff.
Well, yeah.
You guys
songwriting wasn't. Did we get the same again?
Fucking number again. We both got 25. How is that possible?
How is that possible?
You're linked.
The correct answer was 0. He didn't write a single song that he recorded.
Oh,
I knew it had to be low, but
I was gonna go there, but I was like, no, really? He must have written a few.
Through my shit. Okay, I got one more here.
The singer-songwriter era really didn't start until later. Most people wrote other people's songs, and even now we're kind of back in that world. Pop singers don't write their own songs.
Pop music, anyway.
Interesting.
All right. Lastly, Kurt Cobain's "Smells Like Teen Spirit" Fender Mustang has recently sold at auction. So the one he had in the music video, the one he played a lot, how much did it sell for?
There's a guy that I did.
I'm gonna choke a bitch.
What?
It's possible. These are the kinds of questions that.
Yeah, there's a guy I did a work for over in Wenatchee, and he actually was making custom ones of those.
All right.
I would have gone way higher than this, except remember I recently gave some numbers from some rock and roll memorabilia auctions, and I was surprised with how low some of them was. So this one, I don't know, I could be way low.
Okay, here we go. Sorry. Ron said $250,000. Wow. John Mark said $600,000.
Wow.
The correct retail price of auction for Kurt Cobain's "Smells Like Teen Spirit" Fender Mustang sold for $4.5 million.
Holy shit. Well, there you go.
There's a lot of
John Mark is king again. Well done, you guys. I'm going to bail out a little early. I love y'all. Have a great night.
Love you back. Good night. Get that boy to bed and tell Alexa to shut it. Put it in place.
Bye.
I always love how people talk to Alexa like it's an unruly child. Like, Alexa, play Metallica. So anyway, George died the other day. No, Alexa, play Metallica. And so anyway, Alexa. They get mad at it. They stop and they face it. They put their hands together. Alexa, you are disobeying me.
My brother, I don't think he could even function a typical phone unless it's a flip phone, with like prehistoric dial, like that's all he could do. And I remember when we got hooked up with the internet here and with those Fire Sticks, he learned what Alexa was, and it was so fucking funny because he would sit on the couch and he'd yell and scream at the remote, Alexa, I want to watch this and that and this, and it's just bling in a circle, and I couldn't understand what he was doing, but hours, dude, at a time.
If you are having a stroke, please dial 911.
Right.
Well, that was fun. Let's get on out of here. As the weather gets nicer, y'all should take some road trips out and see some lighthouses.
Yeah, we need some
mystical, interesting, wondrous places. Yeah, some sea shanties. You know what? I have one. I recorded one. I did a cover of, I did my own version of an old-timey sea shanty, and I think that's a good call. I'll end with that. It's called Rolling Down to Old Maui. I did all the vocal parts. I fucked it up and got some of the lyrics wrong, and I kind of changed the whole song. But it's a standard. You make it your own. Huh? Yeah. Pass it on. All right, y'all. On that note, let's get on out of here. Tomorrow we will be talking about the rest of 9/11.
9/11.
Wait, I forgot how many. It was 40,000. Was that how many windows were in the Trade Center? 20,000 a pop?
Yeah, 40,000. Yeah.
Interesting question.
Holy crap!
All right, guys. Well, we'll tune in next week. See you then.
Good night.
Bye. Rolling down to old Maui, me boys rolling down to old Maui. We're homeward bound from the Arctic around, rolling down to old Maui. Once more we sail with a northerly gale through the ice and sleet and rain. And them coconut fronds on them tropical lands we soon shall see again. And now we're bound from the Arctic around, rolling down to old Maui. Rolling down to old Maui, me boys, rolling down to old Maui. We're homeward and bound from the Arctic around, rolling down to old Maui. And now we sail with a favoring gale towards our island home. Our mainmast sprung, our whaling done, and we ain't got far to roam. Our stunsail booms are carried away, what care we for that sound? A living gale is after us, thank God we're homeward bound. Rolling down to old Maui, me boys, rolling down to old Maui. We're homeward and bound from the Arctic around, rolling down to old Maui. Rolling down to old Maui, me boys, rolling down to old Maui. We're homeward and bound from the Arctic around, rolling home to old Maui.
Could be some guy out there in the yard, mighty aroused, kind of tweaking on the nipples. Going, oh, lighthouse, I love you.